God, most gracious, most merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So we are now at the 9th session, the 7th lesson in the book, that has to do with the argument or the demonstration or the proof for the necessary being, the existence of the necessary being. The outline of the lesson starts with an introduction where he kind of makes a quick link to what has previously been said, and we'll come back to that. After which he states the argument in a very condensed, very summarized manner. And then he goes on to explain that there are some philosophical, abstract notions that need proper explanation if we want to understand what the statement is actually saying, the argument is actually saying. So he goes on to explain the notions of contingency and necessity, and we'll explain those, and the cause and effect, and the infinite regress, or the impossibility of infinite regress. And then he goes back to restate the same argument at the end, and he emphasizes where there might be some common mistakes. Yeah, so we can jump right into it, so that I'm trying to keep the lesson as short as possible to leave a little bit of time for questions and answers at the end. So the link with what we've said before is that after, the previous introductory lessons, the last lesson was to start presenting proofs for the existence of God. So last lesson was what we called, or what the author considered to be the easiest, the simplest, the best, most efficient proof for the existence of God. And that was the teleological argument, or the argument by design. So the world has design, has order, has purpose, finality. Therefore, it requires an agent that puts that design or order or organization or purpose from the outside into it. And we also said that the next argument, which is this one, is going to be more philosophical. So we explained that arguments can be either purely philosophical, rational, and we talked about that many lessons ago, 4 or 5 lessons ago, the importance of reason in our religion, and that's why we're now building these kinds of arguments. So we established the proof for the validity of rational arguments before. So we said that the arguments for the existence of God can either be purely rational or philosophical, or they are a mix of both empirical, or sometimes referred to as scientific, data and premises, combined with philosophical or rational statements or premises. So you cannot have a proof, an argument for the existence of God that does not have a philosophical or a rational aspect or dimension or part to it. Some of them are only that, and some of them are a combination of that and something else, which is usually data that we get from the world. So this argument is usually referred to, or the literal translation of it is the argument of contingency and necessity. Burhan al-imkan wal-wujub. Okay, necessity is wujub and imkan is contingency. The less technical way of translating it is just saying possibility. The possible, contingent is possible, but that's not the proper term. And so we're going to use contingent, but I'm going to keep using both so that it's clear throughout the lesson. So a few points about this specific argument. The first is that the author says, from all the philosophical arguments or demonstrations for the existence of God, he has selected the one that is the absolute simplest. And without question, to me, this is the most complex, most abstract lesson in the book. Okay, and you may or may not agree with me at the end. It's not that it's a difficult lesson, but the level of abstraction is definitely at a higher level than anything else, and that's because it's a purely philosophical topic. And so it needs a lot more nuance and subtle attention to subtle details to fully grasp the full argument. So this is also something we mentioned quickly in the last lesson. We said that there are many arguments, they bring different things, and so we can say some of them are weaker or stronger, but definitely some of them are more or less valid. And that's what we should be concerned with. So this argument is definitely considered valid. So Islamically speaking, that's the outside of what we're gonna, our demonstration, just between two brackets, this is definitely one of the valid arguments for the existence of God. So we can see hints of it in the Holy Quran and the narrations of Ahlul Bayt or from the Holy Prophet too. So from that aspect, we know that it's valid. And yes, it is philosophically, perhaps it is one of the simplest ones. Definitely not the only one, but it gives you a taste of philosophical arguments, and there are some that are much more complex. And for the purposes of this course, this is the only other argument that we're going to see. So I'll refer very quickly to another one at the end because it's very closely tied to it. But generally speaking, the book presents two arguments for the existence of God, last week's or last lessons and this one. The teleological and the cosmological, or this version of the cosmological argument. So the names, and I'll come back. So as we said, it can be sometimes referred to as a cosmological argument. There are many names. And one of the issues with this demonstration is that sometimes when they're using the name or one of the names, they're not referring to the same thing. So we always have to be careful, what exactly do we mean by the argument that is being presented. So there's definitely the cosmological argument, the argument from universal causation. So you're going to start seeing a common theme here, all about causation or causality. The argument from the first cause, the argument from the causal argument, or in Arabic, Burhan al-Wujub wal-Imkan, and sometimes it's referred to as al-Burhan as-Sinawi. Sinawi basically means the one that comes from Ibn Sina. Okay, so Sinawi is because he was the one who really brought it to full strength, and then it was taken by Ibn Rushd later, and then that's how it went into Western philosophy by Aquinas and others, and today it's very well known as the Aquinas argument. Thomas Aquinas, the 5 proofs that he presents, 4 of them have to do with this, and the 5th one is the teleological one that we presented. He talks about this in the Summa Theologica. So this would be the second argument of Thomas Aquinas, and he explains it in one paragraph. You can go back and read it. The last point that I wanted to mention about this argument is that it's very important, and I'll come back to this, to be clear that all we can prove validly with this argument, with this demonstration, is that there is a necessary being, nothing more. And this is important. And a lot of the confusions and mistakes and problems of this argument is when you try to go beyond that. So this argument is valid to prove that there is a necessary being, and we'll explain what that means. But from there to, we can say, and therefore that being is God, okay, that part is not problematic. But to say that, therefore, the necessary being is one, you can't say it from just this argument. You have to combine something to it. You have to say that the necessary being has this or that attribute, you can't. No attributes except eternity from past and future can be established with this, but nothing more. So to prove power, to prove wisdom, to prove knowledge, anything of that matter needs another proof, a separate proof, which we will do in the next lessons. So this lesson or this proof only has to do with proving the existence of a necessary being. Okay, so we're talking about the essence more than the attributes. Okay, so in brief, the statement of the demonstration, or in short, how do we say the entire proof in just a few words? Every existent, an existent is just a being, something that exists. Every existent is either necessary or contingent. So, in other words, everything that exists is either something that exists by necessity, it must exist, or it's only something that can exist possibly. Okay, that's what it means. Second statement, all beings cannot be contingent. That's the second premise. So why? So the two arguments, and we'll come back to those to explain them. The first one is that, first of all, we have something that exists in the world. So if everything that exists is only a possible existent, we would never have something that ends up actually existing. That's the sub-argument 1. Sub-argument 2, infinite regress, going back into causality. So something is what is the cause of A? It's B. What's the cause of B? C. What's the cause of C? D. If this goes on ad infinitum, to infinity, and you never reach something that starts the whole chain, that series is impossible, 1. And 2, you come back to the previous statement, which is, but something does exist. Because something exists, it means that that series is not infinite. Okay, so those are the 2 sub-arguments. We'll explain them in detail. Therefore, because of all of this, there must be a necessary being, or a necessary being exists. So the point, once again, keeping in mind, the proof that we're trying to establish, the purpose of this demonstration is only proving that there is a necessary being.
One only?
We don't know. That's why we're saying even the oneness is going to have to be proven in a separate proof. That's the issue with this argument. So you cannot extrapolate any other attributes except that it is a necessary being. And then from there, once it's proven, you have to add something else to prove the oneness and to prove any other attributes. So, contingency and necessity. So as we said, contingency is what? Contingency is possibility. Okay, in other words, possibility. And I'm not going to go into why they don't use the word possibility. It's in other fields. Okay, so contingency is the proper term for everything that it includes or incorporates in logic and philosophy. That's a proper term. Okay, so we go to logic for just a little bit. And I'm doing this because, and this is a point that maybe I don't mention enough, the lectures are supposed to be a complement to the book. So I really advise everyone who wants to take full advantage of the lectures to read the lesson at least once after the lecture. And so what I'm doing here, although there are parts that I think I could basically skip over and replace with other things, I want to make sure that if you read the book, you understand what it's saying. So the book starts with the link to logic, so I'm going to explain just enough so that it's clear what's being said. When you say something in the world of logic, so the world of logic is your mental world, where things have to make sense intellectually, rationally, mentally, first, before you come to the outside world. It gives you the tools to make sure that your thinking is valid. In that world, when you make a statement, when you make a claim about something, it's usually made up of 2 parts. You have a subject, and you have something that you predicate, that's why it's called the predicate, on that subject. It's an attribute, a description, something you say about something. So the apple is red, the subject is the apple, and redness of the apple is a predicate. When something is predicated on something else, it can only be of 3 types according to logic. That relationship between the predicate and the subject can be only of 3 types. And you'll see they're very logical and self-evident. Either the relationship between the subject and the predicate is necessary. Either it is impossible, which is okay because we're only in the mental world. Either it is contingent or possible. So if we take something like, let's say the apple is red. If I say the apple is red, the subject is apple, the predicate is red. Is the redness of the apple necessary? No. If I want to say it, I'm intentionally going to ask this and use this terminology. You're going to see that it's useful for this lesson and many others. Is the redness of the apple part of its appleness?
No.
Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, is it part of the nature of the apple to be red?
No, it can be something.
It can be something else. Okay, so I'm intentionally saying it in different ways so that you keep it in mind as we say when something is part of the definition of something else, when it's tautological, when it's by essence, when it's part of its thingness. Okay, that's all meaning the same thing, which is the redness of the apple is not necessary. Okay, is it impossible?
No.
No. So what's left? It's contingent. So by elimination, we know that the only other possibility left is that it's a possibility that the apple is red. It may be other things. Let's take another example. The whole is larger than its part. What kind of relationship is it? Is it, let's say, impossible?
No.
No. Is it possible, or is it by definition? The whole is larger than its part. It's necessary. Okay. If I flipped it and I said the part is larger than its whole,
Impossible.
it becomes an impossible relationship of subject and predicate. This is where we are in the mental world. So I can combine things that should never be combined. And I can say, and this one is impossible because. Okay? And usually it goes back to, let's say if I say 4 is an odd number. Well, the oddness of 4 is incompatible with its definition of its fourness. So it's impossible. It has to be an even number. Okay? So it's a tautology. Part of its definition is that it's an even number. Okay, so it's necessarily even and impossibly anything else. Okay, so as we said, this is a mental world. Now, and this is something that is very specific to Islamic philosophy that almost no one really mentions this way. The first thing that you study in Islamic philosophy is what is its function or what's its definition. And so you're told that the purpose of philosophy, they don't say Islamic, the purpose of philosophy is to study being as being, or as they say, being qua being, okay, in Latin. So you want to study being from one specific angle, which is its beingness. You want to study existence, as existence. I don't want to study, so let's say this chair exists. I can study all sorts of dimensions about this chair. What it's made of, how much it costs. I can study it economically, I can study it from an engineering perspective, or I can study the existence of the chair, or the chairness of the chair. That's what philosophy studies. Okay? But in short, what philosophy is concerned with, or specifically Islamic philosophy, is to study being. The moment we say that, we have to go back to what we said about logic, which is, we said there's 3 types of mental associations between subject and predicate: contingent or possible, necessary, and impossible. If it's impossible, can it make it into being?
No.
No. Therefore, philosophy only studies 2 types of beings: either necessary beings or contingent beings. So that's how you start the proof. And this is important because usually when you read the cosmological argument, no one starts with that. There's a reason why we say the proof starts with this argument, which is, as we said, I think we had it on the previous slide, every existent. That's how the proof starts. Every existent is either necessary or contingent. And we're going to come back to that, where the issue happens if you don't start this way.
So,
Yeah.
philosophy, the definition of philosophy is study of being, the study of being.
As being.
Is that the general definition of philosophy, or is that Islamic?
Islamic philosophy.
Islamic.
Yeah. Okay, so if we go back to the examples we were giving about the 3 types of relationships, I could do the same thing, but this time if I use a predicate as existence. So if I say I exist, not the apple is red. Now existence is becoming the predicate. So if I apply it to myself and I say I exist, okay, so exist is a predicate. Is a predicate necessary? Do I exist necessarily? No, I could not exist. It's not part of my definition to exist. It's not part of my nature, my I-ness, my Jafar-ness to exist. Okay, is it impossible? No, because I do exist. So what's left? Contingency. So I exist, but I exist as a contingent being. I could exist, and I do exist. I'm a potential existent. I'm a potential being that has somehow happened to come into real existence. Okay? So that's if the predicate now becomes existence.
But if you didn't exist, you wouldn't be here. Isn't that a necessity that you are here?
Yeah, another part of it, so that's, we're going to explain that in a little bit further. There's a part of it that is absolutely, it's now I exist by necessity. What does that mean? I exist because all the conditions required for my existence, that's what it means if you look backwards. If I exist, it means all the conditions for my existence were present. If all those conditions were actually present fully, I must exist. Okay. Now we have to distinguish, and I don't know if yes, okay, good. I put a little star here under eternal. I put a little star. The lesson, and this is, it's not really mentioned anywhere, but it's implied, so we're going to mention it explicitly, just so that we don't fall into this problem. And this goes both ways. So you can look at an effect, or you can look at a cause, and you say, as a cause, it's necessary, or as an effect, it's necessary, right? Either or. All the conditions are present, therefore, both ways it works. But the lesson is not about necessity from outside, not external necessity. The lesson is about necessity that is intrinsic or natural or essential. It's part of your essence to exist. So the necessary being has that specificity that nothing else has, that it has existence as part of its essence. Whereas everything else, when it becomes necessary, it's a necessity that comes to it from an external factor. If all the external conditions are present, then I'm going to exist. Has nothing to do with me. Has nothing to do with my nature. And this is going to be the difference. So what we're talking about is the essence of things and not what comes to them from the outside. Okay, so that was a little star that you see there. Okay, good catch. So what do we mean? We're going to start explaining the actual proof or the demonstration or the logic. But before we jump into that, we have to make sure we understand the terminology as we're using it. So when we say necessary being, what do we mean? All it means is that it's a being that does not require an external cause to exist. That's the simplest way to put it. If you need an external cause to exist, you cannot be an external being. So by opposition, what's a contingent being? It's a being that is going to require an external cause to exist. So that's the first one, the causation. This is where it's going to be important to keep in mind. That's why I put 3. This is not part of the lesson. Okay, it's not in the book, not in this way. If you read a lot about this cosmological argument, you're going to see that it has a lot of versions. The reason why there are different versions is that the way you define contingency can be different. So depending on which aspect of contingency you're looking at, the argument is going to change slightly. So one version, one way to understand contingency is to say that your cause is external to you. You are an effect, you have a cause, the cause is external to yourself. Something that causes you is outside of you, so the causation is the reason of your contingency. A second way is by definition. So they're all the same, it's just you're looking at it from a different angle. Second way to look at it is to say, is existence part of your nature or not? Is existence part of your essence, part of your thingness, whatever you may be, whatever thing you may be, or not? So we're saying that a contingent being does not have existence as part of its essence, except maybe externally, which brings us back to the same thing. 3, actualization. This one is the one that is absolutely not mentioned in the lesson, but it's an important point to keep in mind. It's useful, I think. The way contingency is understood usually in Islamic philosophy is to say that when you look at anything, that thing is on a spectrum. There are 2 extremes to that spectrum. One side is existence or being, and one side is non-existence or non-being.
Complete void.
Void. And when we say that something is contingent, in other words, something is possible, when we say something is potential, we're basically saying it's in limbo somewhere between total non-existence and existence. It doesn't exist, it's not in being yet, and it may never become in being, but it's not a non-being either. It's not an absolute non-being, otherwise it would be an impossible being. Okay, so why do we make this point? Because everything that happens to be in this limbo needs something to take it out and bring it in on this extreme or that extreme. That's the philosophically technical way of understanding contingency. Something that takes you out of potentially existing to existing actually. Okay? So that's the tarjih, as they say in philosophy. This is the tarjih. You need something to make you swing on one side or the other. Otherwise, you stay in limbo. You stay a potential existent. What took you out of being a potential to being an actual existent? So when I say actualization, this is a third way to look at this notion of contingency. Yeah.
So can we say, for example, a seed has a potential to be a tree, and if I plant it, that's what it took it from this limbo?
Exactly.
Okay.
So the seed is potentially a tree.
Okay.
But right now it's in limbo. It's not a tree and it's not a tree. It needs something to take it out from that. It needs a set of conditions to take it out from that being in that limbo. Okay? As a seed, it's a full seed. But as a tree, it's in limbo. Okay. So all of that is just to properly understand what we mean by necessary being and contingent being. Okay, so keep that in mind. We're now going to get into the actual premises, or the proofs, the parts of the proof. When we look at the world and everything in it, we say that there are three options. The first one, all existence are necessary. Don't forget, the point of the proof is to prove at least one necessary being. Okay. One option for all the world is to say that everything in the world is a necessary being. A second option is to say that everything in the world is a contingent or possible or potential being. A third option for the world and everything in it is to say that some things are necessary and some things are contingent. Okay. So what do we do with these three statements? So right away the author says we can ignore the first and the third statements. Why? Because both of them imply that there's a necessary being. So what we're trying to accomplish with this proof is proved. So if the person you're talking with or you're thinking is that everything is a necessary being, okay, so that part of the proof is established. So we would have to jump into the second proof or third proof to prove the qualities, the attributes, the kind of existence it is, which we don't cover in this lesson. So that's proof one. Proof three, or statement three, some existence, some beings are necessary. Okay, that's all we need. We're good. So that also proves what we're trying to prove. Nothing further to add for this proof. So the problem is the second statement. If we say everything in the world is contingent. So now we have to ask, that's Q is question, for number two, is it true? Is it possible that everything in the world is only contingent? The claim is that no, this cannot be the case. And the reason is this little statement in two quotes: every contingent being requires a cause. And it's very important to put it in this way, because usually this is referred to as the law of causality, but it's usually not said in this way, and it causes all sorts of problems. So every contingent being needs a cause. Every possible being needs a cause. Every effect needs a cause. Not everything needs a cause. Keep that in mind. So, the author says this statement is not perhaps self-evident, so let's dig into it. Notions of cause and effect. So the reminder, as we said, there are contingent beings and there are necessary beings. Contingent means, now we're talking about causation, that their cause is external to themselves. Necessary means their cause is not external to themselves, which sometimes is referred to in philosophy as self-sufficient. You are your own sufficient cause. You don't need a cause outside of yourself. And so at the end I wrote, it's not an effect, right? By definition, it's not caused by something else, so it's not an effect. So if we take an example, let's say I took a bottle of oil and I poured it in your hand. You may not be happy about that, but you would not ask me, why is the oil oily? Why is the oil greasy? But if you came here and you touched this table, you might ask me, why is this table greasy? Why? Because it's not the nature of this table to be greasy. The greasiness of the table came from outside. You intuitively understand that. So you don't ask me about the greasiness of the grease or the greasiness of the oil, because its nature is greasiness. The table, it doesn't work, so you ask about it because you know it's an external cause. So it also goes for the predicate. So when we're saying something is caused, so the main argument, but it applies to the predicate, the main argument is basically about the subject. So everything needs an external cause if it is contingent. Okay, but what about the attributes? What about the predicates? Now the subject, the second aspect, the second part of the statement. Well, same thing. If it's existence or something else, like greasiness, like sweetness, like anything else, if it's by nature, by definition, you don't ask about it because it's its own cause. If it's outside, then you can ask about it. That's intuitive. So when we say every contingent being requires a cause, we're basically saying every being whose existence is not part of itself, it's just like saying everything that is greasy, that is not grease itself, requires an external source of greasiness that made it greasy, right? Every contingent requires a cause. Every being that is only possible, that does not have existence as part of its definition, as part of its nature, requires something outside of it to bring it into existence, to push it into existence. That's one part. Second part, or second aspect of this, we added, so another layer to the argument, is the aspect of the infinite regress. So there are very complex proofs for the demonstration of why infinite regress is impossible. Not every infinite regress is impossible. Infinite regress is impossible if we're talking about causality and coexistence. So the cause is supposed to be dependent, and the effect and the cause are there at the same time, and it creates a loop that we call a vicious circle. So A depends on B, and B depends on A, and A depends on B, and B depends on A, and that becomes a contradiction. Okay? So there are proofs, there are demonstrations, but really human beings generally understand this intuitively. So he doesn't provide, and I will not provide a demonstration for, but you can go into either philosophy or math or other fields where you can see a demonstration of the impossibility of infinite regress, especially in a causal series. So it's not any infinite regress. In math it could work. Numbers, it's not a problem to say that numbers go ad infinitum on either direction. But if you say that it's a causal series, you're going to have a problem. And he's going to explain why.
Causal meaning...
that it's a cause and effect. Cause, effect.
But in reality, not in our mind.
Even in your mind.
Even in your mind?
Yeah.
You can't do that?
We'll use the example at the end and tell me if it works in your mind. Okay. So he says that it's obvious that if something is an effect, it requires a cause. If something is contingent, it requires a cause. Everything requires a cause. Okay, so in other words, so I'm adding one more way to look at this. I know it's repetitive, but it makes it easier to understand. It's a condition for its existence. So when you say something is contingent or possible, it means there's a condition before it can exist. So what's that condition? If you say it's necessary, then there's no condition. So it exists, and it exists by default, and exists eternally in the past and in the future. So if this is absolute to everything, what's this? This is the infinite regress. If we say that things depend on each other causally, so everything is an effect that needs a cause, and you do that ad infinitum, you keep going back in time, nothing can ever exist. Why? So you just need a moment to try to visualize this, and you'll see that it's very intuitive, very simple. So the example he uses, we can use many examples, but the example he uses is, he says, imagine a little number of people who are about to start a race. And they each give themselves a condition that they do not start running until the person next to them starts running. There's a condition. I have a causal condition. The cause of my running has to be that the person next to me runs. Okay, it works if the person next to me runs, but if the person next to me has the same condition, imposes the same condition on himself, and all of them do that,
No.
will anyone ever run?
No.
Every one of them will say, well, until the guy beside me runs. And it goes like this ad infinitum. And if it's only 10, then it stops. The 10th one will look at someone else to run, and it becomes circular. And if it's open-ended, it becomes ad infinitum. And then when you come back to this world and you say, but there's something that exists. So something must have happened so that I am here. So let's say you enter a room. I'm going to use an example that's not here, but to be honest with you, this is an example that I imagined many years ago when I first read this argument. That little toy that some people have on their desk with marbles hanging by threads, and it's supposed to show you how the force of one at one end can have an impact and travel through the other marbles all the way to the last marble that ends up moving. So let's say you enter into a room and you see that that marble at the end just started moving. The entire argument can be summarized by that instant. What we have in our world today is that last marble that has moved, which is things exist. So the question then becomes, how far do you want to go back? I'll agree with you. You can keep saying that it moved because there was a marble before it. Okay, and what moved that one? The force and the marble before it. Okay, and that one? You can keep going like that, but at some point, you need a marble that started the motion. And this brings you back to this initially this proof, it entered philosophy at the hands of Plato and Aristotle, who talked about the prime mover. That's what they meant by the prime mover. They say things in the world move. And when they say move, they don't mean things move physically, like the wind moves a tree. That's not the meaning of move. Move philosophically, as in they become. Things are not static. They're organic. They're in movement. There's a becoming, a constant becoming. So what triggered the motion in the first place? Which brings us back to the question about the Big Bang. Fine, there is a Big Bang. What triggered the motion in the first place? That's the question. So after all of this, he basically says, we're going to restate it. So now that we have all these notions and we understood the different parts of the argument, we can restate the argument. Every being is either necessary or contingent. Every contingent being, every possible potential being, every effect requires an external cause to exist. If all beings are contingent, remember statement 2, if all beings are contingent, nothing could ever exist. We fall into the infinite regress. And infinite regress means you never end up having anything that moves or that exists. But, and this is a part that he never says in the lesson, but I'm adding it in the brackets, but things do exist. So it's intuitive, but we have to say it as part of the premises. But things do exist. So why do they exist? So that cancels out the infinite regress. Therefore, there must be a necessary being. If every one of the marbles needed an external force to itself, an external marble, you're going to go back like this forever. So there has to be something. So in this system of marbles, we would say one of the marbles must have moved on its own. Right? So we're saying if we're talking about things, about beings, and that's what philosophy is talking about, it's lumping everything together under the heading of being. If it's a being, so God is a being, then there must be one that is necessary, whose causation is not coming from the outside. And therefore it's necessary. It's always in that state of existence. And that's what we mean when we say a necessary existent. Which means it's eternal because it's its nature, it's by definition. So it's eternal in the past and eternal in the future, regardless of what's happening to the other marbles. That marble has force in itself all the time. It doesn't really work in the example of the marbles, but anyways. So a quick final remarks. Common mistakes about this argument. First of all, there's a lot of confusion about what we call the law of causality. And I hinted to it earlier, I'll restate it now. Usually when people say the law of causality, they say everything needs a cause. No, not everything needs a cause. Not every being needs a cause. Every contingent being needs a cause. Every effect needs a cause. Every potential existent needs a cause. But not everything needs a cause. That would need to be proved. Why is everything needing a cause? All we can prove is that if you're a thing that does not have existence in your definition, then you're going to need a cause. But if you have it, you don't need that. So if we can prove that there is an existent, or there must be an existent that has existence in its nature, then you can say there are beings, however many they are, there are beings that are necessary. Okay, that's one. There's an entire topic, I don't want to take too much time, there's an entire topic in philosophy where they talk about what needs causality. And even in Islamic philosophy, there are huge debates and different schools of thought about this. This is what they refer to as manat al-ihtiyaj. So I wrote it, I think, in the second bullet there. Manat al-ihtiyaj, the criteria of neediness. Yeah.
Just a question before I forget it.
Yeah.
Regarding the last line. Since we're looking at all these contingent beings awaiting something that's not contingent, that's necessary to cause their existence. What if that that necessary being is actually contingent but on something different than what?
It's still contingent. So that's not what we're looking for. Because we're gonna have to ask the same question.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one school of thought, one theory says, what requires, maybe I should end with this one, but I'm going to start with this one. What requires, what has neediness is being itself. So the materialistic point of view, that's what it says. Everything needs a cause. And they fall into this big problem of, okay, so either the world has a cause or it doesn't have a cause, it caused itself, or it's caused by nothing, it comes out of nothing, and I'll talk about that in a second, or, because they force themselves into the idea that it's being itself, and this is where we differ. We said it's not being itself that needs cause. It's a specific kind of being. It's contingent being. It's being that is an effect of a cause. It's being that is only potential that requires an external cause. Not being itself. The second theory, there's a second theory that is, I refer to it as becoming. So it's not every being, but every being that goes through becoming or becomes something else, which is what we referred to 2 minutes ago as movement or huduth. So those who are mutakallimin in Islamic philosophy, those who follow kalam, they believe in this. They say al-alam hadith. The world became after it wasn't. The philosophers reject this argument, and I don't want to go into it here. The argument that we showed today does not depend on time. The argument of the mutakallimin has a temporal dimension. The cause is always preceding in time. But that's not always the case. What if someone says that the world is qadim? The world exists from eternity into eternity. Does that mean that you don't need a necessary being? No, you still need a necessary being. So let's say we have two. The world is ancient, and something else, that a necessary being is ancient. The world would still need the necessary being. That's why this argument is stronger than the one of the mutakallimin who bind it with the temporal dimension. We're not saying it's valid or not valid now. That requires a whole lengthy discussion. Okay, but the Falasifa in general don't rely on time, because a lot of them do not believe that it's temporal. And that's why Al-Ghazali attacked them and said that they're all heretics. Anyways, okay, that was his book, Tahafut al-Falasifa. That's what he was trying to do. That's one of the major arguments. Okay, contingency. So that's the one that we used. Why do things have neediness? Because they're contingent. So that's the argument that the author chose. And the last one is the one that we're not going to talk about, but it's very important, and there are others. But this one I mentioned because it's very Quranic, and Mullah Sadra is the one who really brought it the most to the fore, and it's called Burhan al-Ghina wal-Faqr, which I'm referring to here as insufficiency, or al-Faqr, impoverishment. Okay? So things are poor in existence and in every other attribute when they're compared to God. So they are eternally, and from every dimension, they are absolutely insufficient. They are intrinsically, essentially insufficient. That's the fuqr. Okay? That's when the Quran says, Ya ayyuhan nas antumul fuqara. You are poor, you are insufficient before God. Wallahu huwa al-ghaniyul hamid. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the ghina, has the absolute self-sufficiency. And you have the absolute insufficiency. And it's not about sustenance, it's not about your food and your wealth and it's your existence. That's the absolute insufficiency. And everything else becomes secondary to that. Anyways, that's another permutation to this argument. Contingency, but from faqr. Okay. One other aspect that can cause problems with this demonstration is that people who use it, they make a mistake between essence and necessity and attributes. So we talked about that. But when you read it, you'll see that some of them try to prove other attributes of God through this demonstration, and they're right away attacked. And you're not sure, is it because the argument is not working, or it's the argument that's weak, or where's the mistake? The mistake is that they went beyond what we said the proof is meant for, which is only proving a necessary being, nothing more. So the moment you try to prove other attributes of God, you say, therefore, he is powerful and all-knowing, and that's it. You're in trouble now, because you need other proofs for those attributes. You can't use this demonstration for them. Okay, series of causality. That's a big topic. I'm not going to talk about it, but sometimes this proof is attacked because they say a series itself is not a thing. The items in the series are things. They might be effects that need a cause, but the series itself does not need a cause. Okay, that's good, no problem. So we say the proof, we could if we want to generalize it to series, but that requires more discussion. All we're trying to say right now is everything in the world is contingent. Let's look at things on their own. We don't need to look at the whole world together. Look at everything in the world. One item at a time. You can still prove the necessary being through that. So let's look at those things. What's your explanation for the infinite regress? What's your alternative? And we're going to talk about that in a second. Temporality, we mentioned it with the mutakallimin. The modern, that's my take on this. The modern reformulation of this argument today, it's very, very outdated to hear anyone talk about this argument in this manner, unless they're talking about philosophy, medieval philosophy, and all of that. Today, the question is, why does anything exist as opposed to nothing? And there are books that are now appearing. There are a couple that appeared in 2012, 2013, and it's still ongoing. There are TED Talks about this, if you want to listen to them. the universe from nothing, for instance, that was very well known by Lawrence Krauss and others. So, like, there's a few books that have appeared that basically say, why is it that there is something as opposed to nothing? And really, this is what we're asking here. And this argument provides an answer to that. Why is there something instead of nothing? So, I leave you with that to think about, but really that's a more modern reformulation of the same idea. So, 3 little quotes very quickly from 3 different philosophers at very different times in history. One of them is Parmenide, ancient Greek philosopher, very well known for these little bits, nuggets of wisdom that were left by him. One of them is, nothing comes from nothing. And this is often quoted, and they say this is a cosmological argument. So my question to you is this accurate? Nothing comes from nothing.
Yeah, it makes sense if we relate it to what we were talking about.
Nothing comes from nothing except for the necessary existence.
So did we say that everything needs a cause? Or did we add something?
The necessity, yeah.
Okay, so is it nothing comes from nothing?
Something comes.
Only to a certain extent.
Nothing contingent
Thank you.
comes from
Okay, yes. Comes from nothing. What are we talking about? So God is a thing.
But it's
So
not
does this
contingent.
apply to him? No. It applies to everything else. So it's not everything needs a thing to exist. It's every contingent thing needs a thing to exist. Okay? So there's an
Should
issue
I get a
with it.
sticker or something?
No,
I'll
we'll
get
add-
you one next
We'll
time.
add his name to the.
Yes. Second, Leibniz. So this, I think, is actually it's a very nice way of summarizing the entire argument in a very short few words. He says, why is there something rather than nothing? So it's a very modern way of asking the question. The sufficient reason is found in a substance, so a thing. We're not going to go into medieval philosophy and what substance is. It's found in a substance which is a necessary being, bearing the reason for its existence within itself.
Okay, I need to read this like 10 times.
So why is there something that exists? There is something that exists. The easiest answer to this, the sufficient reason, the easiest answer to this is found in a thing, in a substance, in a thing, which is a necessary being, which has
Okay.
its own reason of existence within itself.
Doesn't need anything else.
It doesn't need anything else. So everything that's why I said, yeah, it's dense, but he summarized everything in one place.
Yeah.
Okay, so
That's what you've been saying all class.
exactly. So, but he took many fewer words to say it. Schopenhauer, Arthur Schopenhauer. I just think this is very important for anyone who wants to dismiss all of this and say it's a waste of time. Or I love this quote from him: "Those who do not wonder about the contingency of the world." The fact that the world is only potential, is only possible, so why does it exist? What took it out of being only potential existent to actually existing? He says anyone who doesn't wonder about this is mentally deficient.
Sayid,
Yeah.
on that note, Kareem's probably never thought of that. And most of us here have never thought of that. So it sounds nice, but maybe some of us here are asking, does this really matter? Me knowing being and contingent and possible contingent and impossible, how is this really relevant? And how would you answer someone who might ask that
Yeah. So
and be mentally deficient?
yeah. So we
Kareem.
provided the point. So this is an introductory class, right?
Yeah.
So the introductory class is supposed to give you kind of a taste and to touch on the main issues. So one of the biggest issues is the existence of God. So the author is giving you 2 types of proofs for the existence of God. He gave you one that is empirical, and he said, for anyone who wants to use the easy one that you can even teach a child, that's the one you use. But if you really want to debate with someone, like the heavyweight materialists and Marxists and some of the scientists who are writing 500 brick books, like the one I just mentioned, universe out of nothing, you need to get into this stuff to see where are they making the mistake. So you need to drill down, and we talked a little bit about that. I don't know if it was last lesson or the lesson before, where we said there's an aspect of this it's easy because it's individual. So each to his own and what your needs are. So there are people who don't have a lot of doubts, who are easily convinced by a
Sufficient for
simple,
them,
yeah. But then if I add the collective or the social duty, and you see that this is what's being attacked, the essence, forget the attributes of God. It's the idea, the essence of God that's being attacked. This is what you come back with. Do you agree with me that there is a necessary being or not? Where are you putting your necessary being? It's not God? Okay, where is it? Because if you're saying that there is none, your logic has an issue. Mine doesn't have an issue.
You don't say that. For me personally, Surah Al-Ikhlas has taken a completely different light when you kind of start looking at this material. Before it was just a nice little surah,
Yeah.
and it's like 1/3 of the Quran, and you hear all these things about it, but you might not understand really why and how powerful it is. But when you start considering these ideas, it really gives that whole surah a different dimension,
Yeah.
depth to it. Like when
Absolutely.
Allahu Ahad, Allahu
Yes.
Samad. You understand that completely differently when you go into this topic. For me, anyway, that's
Yeah, 100%. There's so much we can say,
Yeah,
but I'm
not-
keeping my mouth shut now. There's too much to say, especially when you say Surah Al-Ikhlas.
Yeah, it's-
You know how much we have to talk just about explaining the difference between Wahid and Ahad.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
the surah says Qul huwa Allahu Ahad. It doesn't say Qul huwa Allahu Wahid.
Yeah.
What's the difference between Wahid and Ahad? Why? And then what's Samad?
And
then
it
you
goes
go to
exactly
riwayat
it. Some
and then-
contingency and possible existence and dependency is
Yes.
all there.
And that's why we have riwayat, for instance, from Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam. In one of the riwayat, he says there are verses in the Quran, and he specifically says the first 6 verses of Surah Al-Hadid and Surah Al-Ikhlas, they were revealed for people who will come at the end of times, who will penetrate into the depth of religion. So it's almost, he's telling the people of his time, the people who existed at that time, they don't have the conceptual tools. The majority of people don't need what's هو الأول والآخر والظاهر والباطن. But there are people who are going to need them and who are going to get inside them and understand them, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not revealing it for no reason. Anyways, very quickly, my other class has already started. Scriptural formulation. There was a man who came to Imam Rada alayhi salam and who asked him for the proof that the world is eternal or non-eternal. And the Imam answered him in very few words. He said, you did not exist, then you came into existence, and you know that you did not cause yourself to exist, nor is there anything like you who caused you to exist. The Imam's talking about fundamental existence here. He's not telling you your parents caused you to exist. It's what took you out of being a potential existent to actually being in this realm of existence. So this is one very quick, short, condensed, elegant. Leibniz condensed it in a few words. This is condensed in fewer words, and it's intuitive and it's understandable by anyone. Again, I refer to Burhan al-Ghina wal-Faqr. It's not was-Faqr, sorry. It's wal-Faqr, Burhan al-Ghina wal-Faqr. If you can look into it and see the connections. But now you have all the tools to start understanding that other demonstration. And the last thing that I wanted to quickly mention was maybe compare this, everything we said. Now keep in mind, there are arguments that try to say the wise or capable watchmaker, God as the watchmaker. So what's the idea of the watchmaker or the architect? You have someone who comes, who builds a house and leaves it and goes. So I can build the most amazing house, but once it's built, I can leave it. And it's going to stay there, and whether I die in the same instant or not has nothing to do with the house. Right? That's a wise watchmaker. Okay, so is that the kind of existence that God has? And is that the relationship of God's existence to the existence of the world?
No.
Or we don't know. I'm just leaving it as an open question. Okay? Some people say it is. And another part, and we have all these examples in our daily lives, it's just a matter of thinking about them. Let's say the candle, the flame on top of a candle, if the candle ceases to exist, that flame goes out right away. So it's not the watchmaker argument, right? Where you can create something and let it be. You have to sustain it. You have to keep it into existence every second. If I told you close your eyes and imagine a tree, and then you get distracted, although it's only your mental world, that tree just ceased to exist. You have to maintain it into existence every instant for that tree to remain in existence in your mental plane. Right? That's a different kind of existence than the watchmaker, which a lot of people rely on to prove the existence of God. And it's a lot closer to the argument that we explained last week. That's the watchmaker, the wise watchmaker, the capable watchmaker. So I refer to this verse of the Holy Quran very quickly. The Jews at the time of the Holy Prophet used to believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the world in a way that He was not only not intervening in the world, but if He wanted to intervene in the world, He could not. And they referred to that by saying God's hands are tied up or chained. So we have this part of a verse. It says the Jews have said Allah's hands are tied up. So some say that's what it refers to. They say that He created the world in a way where He cannot intervene, and He does not intervene, and He could not even if He wanted to. And so the Quran replies very, very harshly, very strongly here, because it's considered a blasphemy to say that God cannot intervene in the world. They have basically not understood anything about the nature of this world and God. So it says, tied up be their hands, and cursed be they, for the blasphemy that they have said. Rather, both of His hands are absolutely sovereign, or mabsutatan. Now you interpret that however you want. Because if you want to say it's only about infaq and bestowing sustenance, then you can say, okay, but I think the sovereignty here is a lot more. It's existential. It's not about sustenance. Okay, He bestows as He pleases. So if you keep something like that in mind, then what kind of relationship does God have with the universe? Is it one that is the watchmaker, or is it, as you said, no, it's probably a lot more. His hands are fully sovereign in the world. Yeah.
I just want to get your opinion on an incident that happened at the University of Ottawa back in the 1990s. There was a philosophy student who had to do an exam, and the question on the exam was, why does life exist? He said, why not? And got 100%.
Yeah, that's
Handed it in,
a
100%.
professor
What do you think about
decides.
that?
Yeah, whatever the professor decides to do. I mean, I'm sure he was
thought that was
testing
brilliant.
subject matter that was covered in the class.
Yeah, I thought
So
it was
I don't know
brilliant.
what that says about the student and the prof.
But do you understand what he was trying to, the professor was trying to say?
Yeah, but that's not a
Understand
valid
this.
argument. So
Well, I don't
basically I'm
think-
saying, so is he saying that things should exist by default?
No, they shouldn't though.
But that's what the argument, that statement basically says.
Is that
Why
what he's trying
not?
to say?
Right?
Default.
Like, why not? Why shouldn't it exist? So I'm saying, no, it needs, as we say in Arabic, it needs murajjah. It needs something to take it out. So it's not simply by default it should exist. So why shouldn't it exist? I'm arguing against it. And I'm saying, no, he needs to prove
Oh, he's
the why
probably,
not.
he's probably wrong because silently wrong, obviously.
Not
Yeah.
But he got 100%. What was the professor trying to say by giving him 100%?
That is good
He
thinking,
thought outside the box.
philosophically. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
But I don't agree with the student.
I don't agree with either.
They should get zero.
He's a lazy prof and a lazy
Or the
student.
prof. But it's clever.
That was good. That was awesome, man.
Okay,
He
so
tricked his way out.
inshallah we
That's it.
continue next class. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.
Whoa.